very warm welcome, dear colleagues in the field and also from other sister organizations here in Rome. I think this discussion here on quality is very fundamental and it is timely. It's always timely to discuss quality because quality is one of the issues in development cooperation which are fundamental. And definitely it has many aspects to it. First of all, it's the guiding principle, I assume not only of IFAD, but among all the organizations. And insofar, we have something in common with regard to focus. But here, particularly at IFAD, we pay a very high attention to quality, particularly at this time, because we are aware that quality is also the bedrock of our work, that it creates credibility among partners, among our clients, and it will be also the basis for further partnerships and also for growth. And insofar, I think there is no way of shying away in investing even more in quality. On the other hand, to be quite honest, we are at a very difficult stage with regard to quality because there is an inbuilt tension between quality and delivery, particularly in this year where we are heading for a very large and very intensive program of loans and grants. And so we have to find a very well-balanced approach in order not to sacrifice quality.
They cannot hear. Yes, Brazil cannot hear.
Okay, but please bear with me in order not to bore all the others. I'm not going to repeat everything.
Can Brazil hear now?
Brazil?
Looks like now
Klaus?
we have the audio.
Is it? Can you give us a sign, Klaus? Can you hear us?
No, we cannot hear.
Oh.
How about Peru? Can you hear?
We can hear each other, we just can't hear HQ.
It's an opportunity for us, I mean, perhaps just to change views. How do we see it? I don't know that.
Great opportunity for a chat.
Yeah. That's a very dangerous
This is a lack of quality, I would say.
That's an internal.
Okay, so at least we know it's a good test case for us where we really have to invest a little bit more. But perhaps for the sake of our colleagues, I'm just repeating that from my point of view, quality is one of the most important common denominators among all institutions when it comes to creating credibility for development cooperation, and particularly for IFAD. I just mentioned that we are at a particular stage in our program because this is one of the most ambitious years for IFAD with regard to one of the largest programs of loans and grants we've ever had it for. And insofar, we do have to find a very well-balanced approach in order not to sacrifice quality, but to ensure also delivery. And this is a time where we find ourselves in very intensive discussions because we have the overall mantra, we are not going to sacrifice quality. And this might even involve, in some cases, that we run into conflicts, perhaps also with expectations to some of our member states. But also our president is willing to enter into this debate. And I think this is a big encouragement for all those who are working on quality. Having said this, I would also like to highlight quality is one of the issues which you can't delegate. Luckily, we have the Quality Assurance Group. In the past, it was headed by Ivan Cosillo. Ivan, thank you very much for all the work you and your team have done in the past in order to create this kind of credibility and also visibility and acceptance for quality here at IFAD. And now it's headed by Ashwani Mutu, also one of our colleagues who has a long-standing experience, also bringing in the experience of evaluation, which is very valuable when it comes to quality. And I think at this stage of time, where we have to find this new balance, and we find ourselves in very conflictive discussions sometimes. What is the right level of quality? How much quality can we afford at entry? What is necessary? What is nice to have? And what do we have to ensure during implementation? But last not least, what do we have to ensure at completion? So we have to see the full project cycle when it comes to quality. Personally, I'm convinced that quality can't be just delegated to QUAC. That doesn't mean that QUAC doesn't play a very important role. It has to play the role as a kind of gatekeeper here in our organization. But we can't just lean back and say, luckily we have QUAC and they will do the job for us. If quality doesn't become our DNA here in this organization, I think then something goes wrong. And I'm also encouraging our colleagues in the field, also you're in the fields, you have a very important role when it comes to ensuring quality also during implementation. I think there is now ample evidence where certain requirements are and where we have to guide our more focus in future to ensure that our quality will even enhance. We do have the RE for 2019. We do have the right, and these reports highlight particularly the importance of sustainability. And they also highlight the fundamental importance of gender equality. These apparently are issues where we have to invest a little bit more. I can share with you that these are topics which are not only raised for IFAD, but they are quite common when I see the benchmarking also of other evaluations when I see evaluations also for other institutions, that these apparently are those areas where most of the institutions are struggling with. Given the importance of gender equality and the particular role of gender in agriculture, I think an organization like IFAD has to ensure that this will be one of our very high focus areas in future, because we really would like to ensure that the productivity of agriculture will be enhanced by properly addressing the role of women and providing equal chances. In future, I think we also have to ensure that at completion of our projects, we have to give more attention also to exit strategies, which ensure that there will be really a kind of sustainability of what we have invested in the past. And in this regard, particularly the focus on institutional capacities will be very important. And I think also capacity building, and last not least, the empowerment of people. I think only when we ensure that people are empowered in their organizations as individuals, we also can ensure the endeavors for the program we've launched. And I think with these few introductory remarks, I can only encourage all of us in the field here at headquarters, but also in collaboration also with our sister organizations here in Rome, that we all strengthen our focus on these particular very sensitive issues. Thank you very much. I would like to thank QUAC that you have initiated this discussion, and I'm looking forward now also to listen to the different inputs from you.
Thank you so much, Connie. So now I would like to turn it to Sarah. Given that Sarah, as a regional director, you are accountable for a sizable portion of the portfolio or IFAD commitment. So how do you reconcile what Connie has called the built-in tension between a high volume or big portfolio and quality? You have the floor.
Thank you, Ndai, and thank you, Connie. How do I reconcile? Perhaps it's with my neck and with my job, but before we get there, I think quality is actually a big priority and a big point of pain for us. Just to contextualize it a little bit, under IFAD 11, Eastern Southern Africa is meant to deliver roughly around 911 million in PBAS. And we have 16 active countries. We have a portfolio of 52 ongoing programs, but we are also expected to deliver this year 11, let's say, country strategic plans and 11 new operations of a sizable amount. And when I look at the average size of our new operations, about 40 to about 41 million, roughly average size of the designs that we're delivering now. And so the tension between the delivery pipeline and the ongoing projects is a very serious one. So what are the things that we're looking at, really, when it comes to the ongoing and existing portfolio? There we really need to have a system in place, and I would love to have that as a regional director, an integrated, really integrated risk sort of management system. Now we do have systems in IFAD, fortunately, otherwise those billions and billions of dollars that are out there at ongoing operations will be really exposed to risk. And we have a number of systems. We have ORMS, which is our operational results management system. This is very useful. This has all the data that we need to track what's going on with our projects. We have a complete cycle for supervision. This really helps us to get into the details of strengthening those systems. We also have a very rigorous system online portal for our borrowers, our clients. It's called ICP. It's a client portal, which is digitized withdrawal applications and all those things which are the heart of our fiduciary practices. On top of that, we very recently also introduced Notice, an online system for non-objections, which really gives us transparency and oversight on the procurement processes that are going on. You can imagine all the non-objections that we're providing. So all of this really helps strengthen implementation, and it actually also helps, as Connie has said, improve the credibility vis-a-vis our borrower countries. Because with these systems, we are sure, or at least better assured, that we're actually going to deliver on the development results that we're talking about. So these systems help. But I do think there's still room to strengthen them. And I could, in the end of our discussion, talk about, let's say the regional director's wish list, and I'm sure if Nigel and others, Rosanna and Khalida were here, they would really recommend looking at that. When we look at the designs perspective and the delivery of those quality operations, we see a number of issues. If the theory of change from the onset is not right, then we're not going to deliver on the results that we want to see. Right now, the clients, our borrowers, are becoming more sophisticated. In East and Southern Africa, we're moving. They're actually transitioning from low-income countries to upper middle-income countries. We have a mix of countries. They don't demand the same operations. They're demanding innovation. They want to expand their own economic base. So for instance, they're looking at opportunities for introducing commercial agriculture as opposed to subsistence farming. They're really demanding that. They want to become more competitive as nations. They want to look at trade. They want to look at export. That really means, introducing a set of capacities, institutions, and technologies that would allow them to get there. So there's a lot of pressure on our teams, and I think our teams will talk a little bit about that, to innovate and to provide solutions that work. I cannot tell you more. We are under a dead timeline, 8 months to deliver on an operation. Does that give it enough time to validate it? So it's one thing to think up of a fantastic solution that can respond both to environmental pressure, climate change, build resistance, promote adaptation among smallholders, and yet when you get to the ground, we might not necessarily have the implementation strength. And then if we do not provide enough space to actually validate on the designs that we have, then we run risks that when we start implementing, we're not ready. And this really endangers the deliverables and the results. So by the time we get to project completion point, we actually see that there is issues and we were either too ambitious or the results are not the ones that we wanted. So that is just to give a little bit of a flavor of what we're faced with. And our teams are excellent. They're doing a really fantastic job up there. The CDs have to manage meetings with governments. At the same time, they have to manage ongoing supervision missions. At the same time, they have to manage demands and requests from other development partners, because we really stretched to say, you know, and I think our colleagues are here, RBA collaboration, that all takes meetings, that all takes time. And you need to really be on top of it. I'm just very happy that we do have the resources in-house in terms of fiduciary. So without our fiduciary colleagues, our FM colleagues, we would not be able to give that strength in operations. And increasingly, we're also looking at procurement as a very important risk management element. And finally, I just want to say perhaps one or two words around CCAP and safeguard risks, because yes, we have good intentions with our projects, but we also want to take a no-harm approach. That means even, you know, where there's development, there'll always be winners and losers, and we must come to a very healthy balance between how do we compensate those that might lose a little bit of land because a new road is there. And, you know, to get all that data in, we must have the systems in place. A big gap right now, we're not GIS enabled. We don't really have that mapping capacity. And that could really be a game changer for IFAD and for us. And if we could introduce something like that, that would be very helpful, and I could perhaps sleep easier at night. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Very interesting, because you linked design and ongoing operations. You also linked some of the particularities of the ESA region, you know, with the increase of the mix, you know, more sophisticated clients. So, but I'm sure that some colleagues from the country offices will also echo some of your concerns that you raised. Now, turning over to you, Miriam, what are some, you know, 3 key recurring issues that you see at QUAGS, particularly when we want to focus on results, improve results, and sustainability of income? One issue that has been raised by Independent Office of Evaluation. Speak up louder.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, yeah. I think a lot of things that Sarah has said, and also the Vice President, resonate with what I'm going to say. And what I'd like to put on the table is that, firstly, the QUAG is the only body in-house that sees the projects that come from all the regional divisions. And the 3 things that we have noticed, the first has to do with the internal consistency of the documents. I mean, Sarah spoke about that, the theory of change. And what we're finding is that once we have done a very good diagnosis of the development problem that we want to address, we need to go a little bit further and identify very specific interventions. What kind of activities, what kind of interventions do we need to be able to address that development challenge? And in doing so, how do we do it to ensure that we are going to meet the goal? And that goal really should link back to that development challenge. And to me, it is not just a matter of theory of change for the sake of it. We are talking about a practical theory of change, something that the people out there implementing the projects are able to do. So that is something that is across, you know, internal consistency, theory of change, etc. And then the second has to do with ambitiousness. When we go out there, there's so many problems that we see. But when we are designing, what we are finding is that in many instances, there are just so many activities that are being proposed to be solved by IFAD. We want to do roads, we want to do roads, we want to do agriculture, we want to do rural finance, and all this is packaged in one project. We do not look at the capacity of the institutions that we're working with adequately, the country context. Many times, a project, for example, designed for Ghana, you could close your eyes and it's the same project you see being designed for Haiti. So the country context, the fragility, we're not taking that into account. And I think linked to that, something I'm grappling with now is that we are also developing the project implementation manuals. Should we be doing that, or should it be the implementers? I think that is something I would like to put on the table. And a lot of the project implementation manuals we're seeing, linking to the 8 months you were speaking about, Sarah, 8 months, it's really oranges and apples. Lots of oranges, you know, lots of varieties of oranges and apples, all mixed up in one bag. So to me, that is a key issue. And then lastly, we spoke about targeting gender equality. The Vice President spoke about that. But going beyond gender equality, which is very challenging to address, IFAD is looking at working with the poor people. We're looking at working with youth. We're looking at disability. That is a new one. And the question is, how do we target? How do we specify? I mean, how do we come up with really the modalities to go out there? And we're finding that in many designs, in order to be able to tick the boxes and say, looking at gender, youth, disability, the approach we are seeing is basically a quota-based approach where we say 50% women or 10% youth. But what does it mean, a quota-based approach? Have we gone and really analyzed what is the problem? Why is it that the youth are not getting jobs? Why is it that they are not engaged in agriculture? And what can we actually do to transform that? You know, it's basically change. It's not just a matter of quota systems. So I think, to me, those are the three issues that we need to really grapple with, but it's also challenging when you look at the tension between quality and delivery. Thank you.
It's another bucket of big challenges here, and I trust that our colleagues from the field will echo some of those. They may not necessarily agree with everything, but I'm sure that they would echo. So I would like to bring to the conversation Jakob. You've been a country director for about a year, a little bit more than a year. You brought in to the board a couple of projects. So from your perspective, what are some of the key success factors for quality project design and later quality output and outcomes during implementation?
Thank you, VP. Thank you, Nadaya. I think this is a very timely discussion considering the bulk of work we have in front of us now for IFAD 11. So let me just give
Jakob,
a few inputs into
Jakob,
this.
can you please speak a little bit louder, please? Yeah, put it in your mouth, that's right.
Okay, I'll do like this. Okay, so basically, I think that the recent reforms that were done by OPEX has done quite a lot to streamline the processes in-house. But I think we can still be a bit more strategic in how we use our resources for quality. So thinking about these two blocks that you mentioned, the quality at entry, that is the design process, and later the implementation. I think that still we do focus in the design process in some instances on things that are not really that relevant for the final outcome of the projects. Extremely detailed EFAs, a lot of references to different processes that are not necessarily longer relevant 2 years down the line when the project start implementation, etc. So I think that we should really focus on what are the most important aspects. So clear objectives that have strong government buy-in, clear indicators and targets that can be measured. So the CPM also knows that they will be measured against the outcomes of the project. And then an advanced PIM where it's mentioned how do we go about it. And I'm very happy that Miriam mentioned how the QUAC see their role also being that of simplifying project designs. And I think in my experience it's not only a problem that sometimes the country teams may come up with projects that are overly ambitious. Also there are reviewers that maybe do not have a comprehensive knowledge of the country, that do have ideas and that are not necessarily compatible with the country context. And in that sort of context, I'm very happy to hear that QUAC is also quite aware of their role to ensure simplicity, particularly in fragile situations that many of us work in. Then moving to quality and implementation and making sure that we actually see good results from the projects that we have, I'll just highlight two things. One is the quality of, or let's say the profiles of the people working in the PIUs. I think several studies show that may be number one parameter that will make or break a project. And considering how much time and resources we put into the design as such, I think we put next to nothing from headquarters level at least into ensuring transparent processes at country levels. And maybe we could start to think about how headquarters can support the country teams, because sometimes you also feel a little unequipped to deal with these processes. Let's say it could be that one person in the HID could support a project. It could be a roster of consultant that would be good to bring into, support transparent recruitment processes at country level, etc. And the other thing would be to have a timely startup, but also in the early implementation to ensure to have sufficient support from the technical divisions, or maybe even also a sort of check-up from Quark, but at least to make sure that there is sort of like some maybe not hand-holding, but some support in that process, because I think a lot of the reasons that we do not meet the objectives of project is that we lose 2 years in the beginning of projects. And if we could have some tangible support from headquarters as well to ensure that to speed up these processes, I think that would be very welcome. So these were just a few inputs from my side, and I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. I think that some of the comments will resonate with the audience and colleagues. However, regarding the F, I'm not sure, because if we have a representative from the Ministry of Finance borrowing some funds, they would be very much concerned about the rate of return of the investments. But now turning over to you, Matteo, as head of Hub head, HH, same. What are some of the key challenges that you see in that process?
Okay, well, thank you, Andaya. Thank you, Ashwani and Daniela, for inviting me to this event. It's a great pleasure to be able to share some of my experience. And to respond to your question, I would perhaps start by telling a story, using an example, which may not necessarily be representative of all the projects that we do, but is not an uncommon situation. And the story, the example I'm using is the first project, the first 4P project that we had in China, which was one of the first 4P projects we had in IFAD. So back to 2013-14. That project was rated highly satisfactory at quality at entry, at QUAG. It was innovative. It responded to the shift in the mindset of the institution at that time. The capacity, the assess capacity of the borrower were high. So the chances, the estimated chances of success were rated very high. However, by the time we started the implementation, this project became a nightmare. From basically year one, we realized that the approach that we introduced was not fully understood by the implementers. Because of that, they were afraid of taking initiative. They were not undertaking activities, low disbursement. When they finally start under pressure to start implementing the project, they deviate from the original design. So to make the story short, this project shortly became a problem project, very low disbursement rate, low ratings on all performance indicators. And this was a project that was rated very high at the design. So during the implementation, we tried to restructure to address some challenges. We addressed some challenges, but we created new ones. We further restructure it. So by the end of the project, we finally, I think, succeeded in making the project, let's say, if not highly successful, at least successful. Certainly, it will not be a star project in our ratings. But if we look at the design at the end of the project, it's rather different from as it was conceived at design. So all this to share some of the messages or lessons that I took from these examples. The first one is that certainly quality at design, a well-designed project has, I think, and I'm convinced of that, good chances of being well implemented. However, a successful implementation depends on so many factors that are difficult to assess at design stage. Jakob mentioned one, the quality of the staff at PMU. it's difficult to assess that design stage. The buy-in of the government, how can you assess a letter from the borrower? So the first message is quality is important, but there are factors that you cannot quantify at entry. The second one is that the criteria, the dimension against which we assess the project at entry, focus very much on certain important elements of the design, but not on all the critical factors that contribute to a successful project. So at design stage, at quality at entry, we assess the theory of change, whether the project make sense from a logical point of view, the technical soundness of the project. However, and I think this was an assessment of FAO that FAO made a few years ago, about 75% of the problem projects become problem because of issues of procurement, financial management, management. So we're basically assessing a project against dimensions that in the end are not relevant for the success of the project. And the third message is this one, is that, as I said, the good design has good chances, better chances to be successful. However, it's not true that a better or a best project will have better chances to be more successful. All this to say that there is a point in quality above which the cost for making it better exceed the benefits of implementation. And now going back to the point that the Vice President made in her remarks, I mean, the tension between quality and delivery. And here it's probably more the tension between the quality at entry and the quality at implementation. I think there is a point of quality that is probably not the best possible quality, but is good enough to make a project implementable. And then the success of a project depends very much on the way you implement it. You support the project with implementation. You're able to capture, the differences between the assumptions you made during design and the reality on the ground. So it's important to aim at quality. Probably it's not important to aim at the best possible design. And one of my mentors when I started this project used to say, the best is the enemy of the good is the enemy of the appropriate. And we should aim at having the appropriate level of quality at entry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matteo. I'm sure many of your colleagues will echo that. In particular, reaching the right balance between what is quality and what is necessary to achieve success in a field, as well as the focus that has been made in-house on procurement, financial, fiduciary matters, and now the question would be to what extent something similar for technical area should also be considered to strengthen the PMU staff. Now, Audrey, to you, working in SKD, now there is a shared responsibility between SKD and PMD with regards to the technical quality of the portfolio. How can we further strengthen the technical quality of IFAD activities on the ground?
Thank you. I am the last one to talk, so I will not bore you long. I have thought about that question because I'd like also to have some time for interactions with all the people connected and with you. So I have deliberately chosen to concentrate on implementation because this is actually where we're having the results and the impact. And I think that my colleagues have also already explored some of the aspects of designs. I'm going to echo some of the issues that Jacob was raising, and I'm going to build upon the flexibility during implementation that Matteo was telling us with his story. For me, there is 2 points with which we could increase the technical quality during implementation. One is with an enrichment of the startup. At project startup, we usually deal with all the administrative, the fiduciary, and so on aspects, no? I would also develop a more elaborate agenda on technical content. Because here we are talking about two groups of people that never meet. The design team and the implementation team. As Matteo was saying, we don't know them beforehand, at least not all of them. So, but still, we want to hand over the motivation to take on the approach, some ideas, how to go about it, and to adapt. So there is, for me, there is a space here to improve a little bit there. The other one is to go up into gear into implementation support. Matteo and Jacob have alluded to it. We do our best. It's a little bit different from supervision. Supervision has a dimension of control, quality control to it. Implementation, you're really sitting side by side with the project team and you deal with the difficulties together. And again, it's about the people that are implementing. I'm talking here about the technical people. They're usually isolated, they're confronted with difficulties. Either they have capacity limitations or they have specific contexts that are really a challenge. And they need to have somebody to talk about it. And they are rather left alone. This is where, for me, there is a little bit of work that can be done. We have some interesting elements coming up. From my point of view, there is we could strengthen a wider approach with a portfolio approach when we do implementation support. Instead of serving one project, we can serve different projects ongoing in a given country. So that could be also to balance out the investment. And with regards to the internal technical staff that Jacob was calling upon, I'm very aware of the limited numbers that we're talking about. So I would then call for complements from 2 points. One from the KM strategy with the community of practitioners that are proposed to be piloted in this triennium. Because those community of practitioners have the potential to bring together the technical people from the projects, from IFAD, and also from the technical partners that we're having. So there, the knowledge can circulate better. The other one is calling on PRM for them to the Partnership and Resource Mobilization Division. Right now, they do focus on the financial partnerships, but we are ignoring a little bit all the technical partners that we're also working with for a long time. So those would be my 2 points. Technical startup and more implementation support.
Thank you so much, Audrey. Now we have about 15, 17 minutes to engage discussion. And I was going to turn it over to our colleagues from the field. So if you could please raise your hands if you have a question. If you could, I can see Peru is ready. And if you could just refrain from making comments, India, thank you, but to really be specific and to the point, and also to perhaps identify who would you like to respond to your question. Peru, you first.
Okay, thank you, Nadia, and colleague, good afternoon, Rom, and colleagues in country office. Just to complement from the field what has been said, and I have to say, and colleagues here also agree, that we have a common understanding of the issue. But there is a different tension that I would like to highlight, aside from this quality versus delivery and also implementation versus design. And it's more what we can call the global versus the local. And I will explain. What we need to highlight here is, first, what is the purpose of quality? And the second, if we are really client-oriented. On the first, we need to explain to our partners that this is not simply an issue of IFAD demanding, because it's a corporate a priority, or because our mandate, that all the systems that we are putting in place are related to safeguards, are related to cost efficiency, are related to delivery. But at the end, the important thing is to say that quality has to be instrumental to reaching the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, especially poverty. So we have to say quality is not an end in itself, is a means to help all together to reach a reduction of poverty. Sometimes this is missed because when we go to checklists, we go to revisions of the documents, what we see is more an emphasis on ticking boxes and not on making the project more aligned to this goal. The second is the client orientation. It was already mentioned by some colleagues, but we have to go from the global to the local and be able to link quality to the priorities of the country. This is a real challenge because the closer we are as country offices, as decentralization is moving forward, we have to interpret it, we have to understand, and we have to be more connected to them. So the challenge here is how to make a quality control, a quality assurance responding to client needs. That's one of the challenges I would like to highlight. I don't have any of you specific to respond to these two issues, but I'll leave it to the floor for that. Thank you, Ndaya.
Okay. Thank you. India, please. Rasha?
Yes, thank you very much, Ndaya. I had 2 points, please, and really thank the panel for their very good, very excellent insights. Now, the first point is related to what Matteo mentioned about appropriate quality at entry. What we are seeing is that we don't really have the budget for design that we used to have 5 or 10 years ago. It has reduced tremendously, but our expectations from design have also increased tremendously. What I see that other agencies do is that they don't do such detailed design as we do. With the budget they have, they may go to what we would call more of a concept note, and then there is a 1 year, 1 full year, fully funded of inception that can be a resource from the loan to do the detailed design. So I'm trying to see if that would be one option that IFAD could consider, and the question may be more for Connie as a representative of senior management. The second point is more of a question related to FIPS, the pre-financing facility to facilitate project startups. And that goes to the point that Audrey was making about the importance of startup and the handover between the design and the implementation team. So can we have some feedback from FIPS implementation over the past 6 or 8 months? If perhaps Sarah could share from ESA? Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe we'll take a couple of questions from the floor, if any, before we turn it to the panel if necessary. Going once? Yes, please.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Carlos Tarazon. I come from the FAO Office of Evaluation. And thank you again for inviting us, Ashwani and the colleagues, to this event. One point that we see recurrently in projects in FAO, and myself been to many missions evaluating the actual impact of this, is the limited space to take into account what the beneficiaries actually want. And therefore will carry on once the project finishes. No? So I was wondering if IFAD take some measures on this regard, no? And what do you think? How much it actually influences the ultimate effect of the projects? No? Thank you.
Thank you. And so, any more questions from the floor? Yes, please.
Thank you. I wonder if there's an inconsistency between trying to be innovative and having a sort of very traditional approach where you still separate design from implementation. Don't you think that, given the context of uncertainty in the process of design, that there could be an alternative modus operandi that could help to shift the frontier of the tension between the design and delivery in terms of quality through an innovation in the process, trying to avoid the illusion of perfect design or even of very appropriate design, acknowledging the limits, the inevitable limits in the design process. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe now I'll turn it to the panel and perhaps ask Miriam to answer the question of the purpose of quality and engagement of the government, as well as the level of appropriate level of quality, you know, for successful implementation and sustainability. Mike, for Miriam. Oh, thank you.
I would say that is a relatively challenging question, because if we go back to what Matteo was saying, is that what is the appropriate level at which, if we have a design, we would then provide it to the government counterparts to implement. And I think that really is the elephant in the room, because we don't implement these projects. These are not our projects. But on the other hand, how do we satisfy our board members, our, let's say, those who finance us? How do we satisfy what they want to see, for example, gender? Whereas maybe the government is looking at infrastructure. So I think it's a really tricky, it's a tricky thing to come up with an answer per se. I know I'm not answering what you're saying, but I've been a CPM too. So I mean that the challenge, it's quite a challenge, but I would go back really and sit down at the table with the government and ask them, what do you think IFAD can contribute? This is IFAD's mandate. This is your mandate. How do we come together? How do we design that project so that ultimately when it is being implemented, it is you're the owner. If it fails, it is you. And over above that, when I am doing the implementation manual, I want you people to do it. I do not know your systems. So you go ahead and tell me how it should be implemented. And I think if we use that trajectory, then we would be actually satisfying IFAD and the member states. I mean, IFAD and our borrowers. Thank you.
But I think, and it's not to put Quag on the spot, though, I believe that some of the processes that you have outlined are actually happening, whereby between country directors and the government there is a discussion and agreement of what to do next. One of the questions, if I understand this correctly from colleagues, is that now that there is an agreement of what to design, there is an internal process in-house that vets the quality of the project. And the question is, given that there are a number of criteria, what is the flexibility here to agree on an appropriate level of quality based on the set of criteria so we can move forward?
You want me to lose my job?
No! We have the director of the director of Quag, and then we have the vice president who heads the
I think what I would say here is that in terms of quality, is we have a system today whereby the inputs at design do not come on time, because the expectation is that the CPM is going to, and his teams are going to design a project in 8 months. But by the time it is midway, the expectation is that the design should be pretty well advanced. So all inputs really are coming in what we call the design review, at the design review stage. And then the CPM probably has just 1 month to go and finalize the design. So I would say that in terms of coming up with standards, we first have to take a step back and say, at DRM stage, at midway, what is the expectation? And in defining that expectation, we have PMD, and we also have the quality assurance group. How do we come together to say, okay, fine, at DRM stage, this is what we expect from you. And then when you come back to the quality assurance group for your final review, when we are looking at quality at entry, what would we be looking at? Now, we are really, before the quality assurance group was looking at quality at entry, but now we are basically looking at quality enhancement and quality, at entry. It's a little bit blurred, but it's more of a technical function at midway. So I think these are things we need to open up and reconcile what is required at every stage. Have I answered your question? Have I
I think
answered
so,
your
yes,
question?
yes. So perhaps linked to that, I would like to ask Connie a question that was raised actually is to the extent that the expectation is really high in terms of the quality, at the same time, as Matteo has mentioned, very quality project is not a guarantee for quality at completion. However, there is also a need for some flexibility. And as Rasha was mentioning, the flexibility could be captured in a concept note, perhaps fleshed out, but still a concept note, whereby the team is fully funded for a year to actually develop, so there is equivalent of a planning grant or another mechanism to actually really take the time to fully develop the project. Is there a possibility to consider something like that in-house?
Definitely, because IFAD is a learning organization, and we are at.
Take this one. Take this one. Take this one.
Well, I take a very positive view from this. First of all, I would like to thank you, to thank particularly also the colleagues in the offices and also our panelists, because this was like a kind of reality check. I wish we would have allotted a little bit more time, because this is a discussion which really requires a deeper analysis and deeper reflection. And insofar, I don't want to present a shortcut right now. You might bear with me, but when you ask me, is there an opportunity for changing the processes, I'm very positive about this, because IFAD is a learning organization, and we are at a stage where we really have to reconsider also our processes, not only in order to deliver on our programs and for loans and grants, but I think we also would like to see it in the broader context. What is the future of the fund? And how do we ensure that we become an attractive partner for the borrowing countries, but also for other institutions? And insofar, I think there is a necessity to revisit our processes. What the discussion really indicated and highlighted is, for me, that there is not a mechanistic approach to quality. First of all, there is a strong acknowledgement for quality, and we can't ignore all the evidences we have from evaluations from our internal self-assessments. Nevertheless, there is, in confrontation with what particularly our colleagues in the field are encountering, always a clash, and quality also has to fit to the expectations of our partners. So there is a political dimension into it, and also a cultural dimension into it, where sometimes perhaps our definition of quality, as we've summarized it perhaps on the basis of past evaluation, is not really the precise expectation of our partners. And if it clashes in these contexts, I think it's bound to fail. And insofar, for me, there is an inbuilt plea, and also that we have to invest also more in constant dialogue with our partners, particularly during implementation. I've also heard that sometimes the quality of the PIUs is not sufficient, and you're asking for additional support. We have to look into these. I don't like to make false promises in this regard, but definitely you've given us a lot of hints, and I think it was quite remarkable to hear that we should feel encouraged to rethink particularly our approach with regard to quality at entry, that we are not over-perfectionists, because there is not a perfect design. And the examples which were given by Matteo are quite striking, and I think this does not hold true only for China. You'll find it in every region. So flexibility is key during implementation. Our flexibility, but also our constant dialogue. And I'm very happy that at least by now IFAD is a much more decentralized organization. So with our colleagues in the field, we have much better chances for this constant dialogue. What I can ensure you that we will take stock once more on the basis of these discussions and inputs, and we try to find pragmatic approaches also on the basis of the proposals you've given to us. Thank you very much. And I would really like to highlight once more the particular work what QUAC is doing at the moment, because there is a tremendous workload. I know this, and I'm very, very grateful that you're taking the challenge and that you're also open also to look into new processes. And I think the IFAD really depends also on your critical views, and please also feel encouraged to share with us your critical views and also further recommendations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have time for another round of questions, I think, but I believe that Rasha also asked a question specifically for Sarah to bring your experience with the pre-financing facility for startup.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you. I think there's been quite a lot said at the, let's say, in terms of quality around implementation. Now, just to, before I get to Russia's point, increasingly our program of loans and grants is one instrument, as Connie has said, to get development impacts. And I think a number of us here are really concerned about, addressing poverty, SDG 2, particularly 2.3. And increasingly there is evidence that there's other tools and instruments out there that also bring about desired results. So where we're struggling with poor performing projects, you could think of other mechanisms like equity, for instance, if you want to work directly with the private sector, that brings about returns on poverty. You can also think of other financing instruments and tools that are more effective and require less overhead and less time and energy to them. So I think that's for broader discussion beyond the instruments and tools that we need now. And increasingly, our borrower countries are asking for those instruments, which are much lighter, that can give more buck for the bang, if you will, and we can actually deliver more in terms of returns on poverty. So that we should always keep in mind. And I really like the question that was raised, or the observation that, is there room to really rethink our traditional project cycle, if you will. So you go to design and then implementation and then you go out. And think more of platforms of co-creation or of systems which are flexible, and you actually go backwards and forwards in terms of modules that identify development problems, come up with solutions, and come up with innovative designs for that. And I think increasingly you do find other providers looking at those types of solutions as well. So we shouldn't limit this discussion to what we're actually faced with today, but perhaps broaden it and look at other facilities and tools that could actually be more transformational and bring us better results. But coming back to that facility that could support. Now, interestingly enough, many of the countries in East and Southern Africa have a number of key qualities that are very, very unique to them. One is the fact that most of these projects have to be ratified in Parliament. And that is good for us, right? Because it shows that there's a functional Parliament that makes a decision around an investment project in which you have taken a loan. And that shows full ownership and transparency on their part. But that process alone can take up to 8 months, 6 months at times. And for us, we're saying that is a quality metric, where we're saying startup is too long. But what are our teams doing between ratification of the project and actual startup? So we actually have a case in point, 6 months gaps, in which we could already start doing startup-related activities and making and filling some of the gaps that we already identified during the design phase. So I think it's, it's something that we need to reflect on. And many of the governments haven't actually stated, they haven't actually said, okay, can you please provide us with, let's say, a startup facility? That financing request, we don't really get much of. I think the question then goes back to the teams to say, are you having that discussion? Because you know your context very well. To say, we have experience here. For instance, I take a country, Malawi, and your startup process is very long. We would advise you to, for instance, request IFAD to do pre-financing so we can already start up and avoid delays. I think those conversations are really in your hands, and you're well equipped to try and do that. Now coming back to our colleague from FAO, I thought that was a very interesting question. How do you put the smallholder farmers at the center of our designs? How are we actually doing that? Are we holding consultations with them? We do have country strategic programs and strategic papers that we consult many stakeholders. And then during our designs, we actually design missions that go straight to the zones and the provinces that we want, straight to districts, and we have consultation sessions there. But then again, our Vice President amply said, in those consultation sessions, do we have women and youth presented? And if they're there, do they actually have a voice? And how are we facilitating that dialogue? Often enough, those voices are ignored or not given sufficient space. And so then you can argue that many of our projects are not able to really capture and target those specific groups. I think we have more success at that with our grants because they really target those groups and set them aside, and then you have designs which are very specific around that. So I don't want to carry on beyond that. Just some remarks.
Thank you, Sarah. We started 5 minutes late, so we have time for another round of questions. And I can see Uganda is raising a hand. And Peru again. Excellent. So first, and Kenya. All right. So let's first with Uganda, Kenya, and then we'll go to Peru because Peru spoke already once. Uganda, please. Uganda, please.
Thanks, Ndaya. Good afternoon, colleagues. Just a couple of comments and then a question. I think with respect to design, I really like the idea that with the truncated design timeline, you have to go with a broader framework and then have the discussion as a continuing process to get to what will be an implementable design. I think it's one that it's worth consideration. On the implementation side, no matter, I've seen many designs, and I think no matter how good a design is at entry, you will end up with issues. And I think IFAD is very flexible in that, where you can go ahead and restructure the project. So that's something I think that's also not availed of often enough within IFAD at implementation. I think a question is, I'm hearing through the grapevine that a lot of projects are being rejected at DRM stage, and it would be really good to understand some of these reasons so we can mitigate those risks early enough, as I'm in design right now. Thanks.
Kenya, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Ndaya. Good afternoon, everybody. You have to excuse me. My question is on, first of all, thank you so much with all the insights that came from the discussion. In fact, I think 1 hour is too short for such a discussion. There are so many points that we can bring to the table. But I have it's not a question, it's really an observation. It's on the scheduling of QUAG, if you allow me. This is the first year of our IFAD 11 cycle, and we have been encouraged very strongly to front load most of the designs. As a result, 2019 is really flooded. I'm sure I didn't participate in the festival. We had problems connecting, but I don't know if somebody pointed out that there are so many projects that are coming through for design and also COSOPs. Now, I asked myself, I said, well, we know what the capacity is in QUAG and also senior management to chair these meetings. So it should really be, I think there has to be maybe a maximum number of projects that can go in a year. Because here we are now, we are having problems securing OSC meetings because we have projects that have a cost of that is going to December, but all the dates have been taken and they all are going to December. So the question is, can't we do the scheduling better? Other than, and all the information, by the way, is already in grips. So I think there's a need here, to harmonize the scheduling of these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. Peru?
Yes, thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for the very good discussion. I just want to bring one additional element into the discussion, which is related to the PMU role, which somebody said before is so key for the implementation of projects. There is an experience which is happening in some countries in which we operate. I remember Rwanda for sure, I think Argentina, and probably other countries, in which we are basically using a unique PMU to manage the whole portfolio, the whole country program. And that's a practice which is bringing a lot of benefits, including the fact that you have continuity in capacity, because you basically use the same people, the same know-how accumulated through the years to implement new projects. And then you also have full ownership during design, because the same people are involved in design, and then they are starting implementation. So you overcome some of the constraints we were discussing before. So maybe this is a practice we could study a bit more and see whether this can be replicable under which circumstances it can be replicable in other countries. Perhaps there are also there is an issue with governments, of course, but I think in Rwanda for sure, because I was there in my technical role as a PTA, former PTA. In Argentina right now, as a country director, I see the benefit of having this kind of continuity in the implementing partner. So I think this can be something to be studied a bit more. Thank you.
Thank you. And so before I give it to the panelists to respond, just in response to the comment from FAO with regard to the participation of beneficiaries, IFAD is currently completing the revised operation guidelines on targeting that will be presented to the board in September, and that really address that question with some minimum requirements for COSOP's design and implementation and completion to ensure broad participation from the various target groups at IFAD. So stay tuned for that. Now, turn it over, probably Quag, but I would say that regarding the DRM projections, I think you highlighted at the beginning some of the key issues, and I would say it's probably linked to that. But perhaps the issue of capacity, because I think that one is key, given the front loading. And then for PMD, perhaps the issue of country program management approach. That's something to consider, and I believe it's happening. And then Sarah has something that she can comment on, as well as Matteo, I think. You have something to say on that, right? So first to you, Miriam, then Sarah and Matteo, and then we close.
Yes, Lakshmi, very quickly. I wouldn't say rejection per se. We've had very few rejections, if at all, during the DRM. What we tend to do is to have a more positive approach, whereby if we feel that there are fundamental issues that still need to be taken on board, we discuss it with the country team and the director, and we advise them, and sometimes we suggest that they withdraw the submission and work more on the design. So that's the approach that we have taken in working with the teams, and we actually even give them value-adding suggestions on what needs to be done, and we interact very closely with them. And then on the capacity, yes, we are struggling. We are all struggling. It's very heavy. And I think that is a bigger issue to do with the transition to the new system, and then the required managers who are expected to chair these meetings. So what I would say there is that the QUAG has commissioned, is looking, the QUAG is looking at the systems. We're doing a review, a functional review that just started today. And we would be looking at the processes and how we can serve everybody else better and how the system can be much smoother. And that's why we would be reaching out to you to provide us also with your comments, any issues you're having and suggestions you have going forward. Thank you.
Sarah, with country program of Matteo first.
Very briefly on Marco's comment, right? I think it's an excellent idea, probably not applicable everywhere. In countries that are highly decentralized, like China, like Pakistan, you cannot have a central PMU at national level. Basically, each province has its own. But all this to say that there are plenty of ways that we can think of to, ease this process of building the ownership and creating the capacity at the institutional level. We can request the project director to be appointed at design. There are plenty of ways. And each country, each CPM should find out the best way to achieve that.
Sarah?
Indeed, just to complement, there's a whole political economy, and I think our Vice President mentioned that. We tend to perhaps be blinded a little bit and be very technical when we're in the field as CDs. But this dynamic and understanding that dynamic, we're trying, for instance, I take the example of Zambia, where we're actively trying to establish one of those units. In Angola, they went to Rwanda to learn from that experience. So in essence, ESA is trying to promote that as far as it can and where it's possible. In Burundi, they found out that that isn't really ideal, so all the PMUs are actually in one building, which has created a similar dynamic. So you have 4 different IFAD projects, but they're still sharing in the one space. So again, fully agree with Matteo here to say it really depends on the context as to what's possible in that sense. But just speaking to the PMUs and the coaching, I think we have opportunities during negotiations with our borrower countries, with our clients, and there, when we're negotiating financing agreements, we can be very explicit around how we want teams to be recruited, with what types of capacities. And at the financing negotiation stage, we can lock that. And if we do that early enough, then I think we position ourselves better in terms of getting the right staff with the right skill set. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with this, we're going to bring it to a close. But before we do, I'd like to invite Ashwani, Director of QUAG, for the closing thoughts. Okay, sure.
Right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I really want to thank everyone who's here. Thank by starting the Vice President for hosting this Interact session and for all her support that she has provided to all of us in organizing this conversation. I want to thank COM also for actually putting this together and guiding us through the process. I want to thank my colleagues. I saw 10 country offices were connected. I think that's nearly a record, maybe. So thank you very much for giving your insights. And of course, all the panelists, and Daya for your moderation, and colleagues also from the RBA's IDLO who have joined us this afternoon. So thank you very much for that. What I want to say is that this conversation is part of a process, and we look forward to having further dialogues with you and others in different formats of, in different formats here in IFAD and beyond. Hopefully we'll be able to also reach out to you in the regions at some point in the future. The other point I want to mention is that what we've heard this afternoon, we have been very diligently taking notes of everything you have said so that your feedback can inform the further process. As you heard from Miriam, we are now launching a review of QUAG, but also of the design process. And I hope our senior advisor consultant is here. Jürgen Schwartmann, he was here. He probably had to go to a meeting now. He's gone off to a meeting. So we are going through an internal process of reflection and renewal, building on the excellent work that has been done so far. So it has been extremely valuable, this conversation in the afternoon. We will also summarize this conversation, today's conversation, in the form of a blog, so that you can see the different views that have been expressed. But rest assured, we will take them forward also in the review process. And maybe one point on substance from my part that I heard this afternoon, and it actually took me back to my evaluation times, and that is that we shouldn't look at design and implementation in a compartmentalized manner. Design and implementation really is a continuum. At the moment, I have a feeling we might be looking at it a little bit somewhat in boxes, and we really have to look at it as a continuum. And the second point related to that is that design is really not static, and that throughout implementation, as we heard from our colleagues, restructuring and so on, we have to continuously ensure the evolution of design to ensure the continued relevance of the project, even during implementation, and one really needs to adapt projects to the changing environment. It could be the government context, but it could also be the IFAD context. So these are the type of issues that we will be taking forward in our review together with you. But with that, thank you very much, and I pass the floor back to Ndaya to close.
Thank you very much, Ashwani. So I want to thank you very much for this very actually lively debate. I was a little bit concerned. I wasn't sure what to expect, given that we are all stretched, to be honest. I mean, whether it's CDs or QUAGs or SKD, we are all working really, really hard to deliver on this substantial mandate. Similarly, we have heard that the connection between design and implementation has to be established, but perhaps we should also look at the resources allocation between those two processes, because currently we do have substantial resources allocated for design, but perhaps we can also think along the lines of a lighter design process for some flexibility, but then additional resources for startup and implementation. This is just a beginning, as mentioned by Ashwani, so we hope to continue this conversation. Sometimes we avoid scheduling meetings for an hour and a half because nobody shows up. And when we set for an hour, then it lasts an hour and 15 minutes. We want to thank the colleagues from the field, very much appreciated. Some of you, it's in the morning, late afternoon, and then the same time zone. So thank you again. Please join us for the next one. We want to thank the panelists for being here on time, participating, and being honest in the discussion, the VP and QUAG, and you, the audience. So a round of applause for all of you. Thank you.